On the night of Tuesday, March 22, 2011, 25-year-old Summer Inman was expected to finish her shift as a janitor at Century National Bank at 11:20 p.m. When she didn't return home as planned, she was reported missing. Born on December 31, 1985, in Logan, Summer Dawn Cook Inman was the daughter of Michael and Deborah Chambers Cook. At the time, Summer was living with her parents in Logan, Ohio. She was a recently divorced mother of 3 young children, 2 daughters, aged 5 and 3, and a son, 21 months old. When Summer was 15 years old, she met William, who was 17, through their church community. The 2 teenagers got married and settled in a house next to Will's parents, Bill and Sandy. Bill and Sandra Inman met in church back in 1983. He was 18. She was only 16. The young people, with the permission of their parents, got married. They settled in the small town of Logan in Hocking County, Ohio. Bill considered himself a devout man. He worked as a construction worker and played instruments at Faith Tabernacle Evangelical Church, located near Nelsonville, Ohio. Sandra was a housewife. In 2004, 39-year-old Bill Inman imagined himself as a religious leader. He turned his garage into a makeshift church and began holding services there. Local residents did not really approve of everything that the self-proclaimed pastor was doing, but first neighbors, then their acquaintances, began to come to his mysterious garage on the property. People prayed, calmed their souls, and left donations. Soon after their marriage, Summer and Will had 3 children. Living in close proximity to Bill and Sandy allowed the young couple to take advantage of family support, often having them watch the kids as they went out with friends nearly every weekend. Summer's diary later disclosed that she and her husband had differing views on what constituted a happy marriage. According to Summer, Will was interested in a polygamous relationship and actively sought potential new wives on polygamy-focused websites. She also detailed that shortly after their marriage, Will became increasingly possessive, controlling, and at times violent. Reportedly, Will expected dinner to be prepared and ready upon his return from work, and Summer was not allowed to retire for bed without his permission. In 2005, the Inman family began to experience financial difficulties. Bill's church activities did not bring in much income. The family decided to move to another state in search of work. In 2006, the entire Inman family moved to Florida so that Bill and Will could work together in construction, focusing on projects such as building hotels. They returned to Ohio in 2008. In 2010, Bill initiated Mercy Ranch, a nonprofit organization aimed at assisting orphans, widows, and the homeless. He described its purpose as helping individuals who had lost jobs or experienced reduced hours to maintain their homes, as stated in documents filed with the Ohio Secretary of State's office. To fund housing projects for those in need, Bill decided to sell $10 raffle tickets, with the promise that the winner would receive a new house. The first raffle raised several $100,000, but despite the fundraising efforts, no houses were constructed. Disappointingly, ticket buyers did not receive refunds for their purchases. During this period, Bill also attempted to establish his own church, despite having his ministerial license permanently revoked. As the strain in Summer and Will's relationship persisted, Summer crossed paths with a man named Adam Peters. The Adam was known for moving between towns in search of work, and Bill hired him for odd jobs around both families' homes. Bill, who was a minister with aspirations of opening a halfway house, had brought Adam on board for these tasks. A connection developed between Summer and Adam, which ultimately prompted Summer to take the step of filing for divorce from Will in June 2010, marking the end of their 6-year marriage. Summer wrote in her diary, "I'm so tired of having to please everyone else but leaving myself high and dry. Don't I deserve to be happy too? Don't I deserve to fall in love with someone again and feel love from someone again? I think so. I don't know if it's the right time to tell Willie or not. I feel bad not telling him because I think he deserves to know the truth and to know that I don't want to be with him right now. I want to be alone for a while and find out who I am again. I'm just some slave that runs around and does as she's told. I love my kids with all my heart, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. But I don't want them to grow up remembering their mom as someone that just did as she was told. I just don't know how Willie will react to all of this. I don't know if he will get mad and try to take the kids and run, if he will threaten to hurt me, or worse yet, actually do it. All I want to do all day is cry and sleep. I just don't know how to get out of this situation and have it end well. Maybe by the next time I write, I'll have figured it out. Summer started dating Adam, prompting her to leave the residence she shared with Will and move in with her parents, bringing the children along. Will relocated to his parents' place, and they agreed to share custody of their kids. Will, Sandy, and Bill struggled to cope with the divorce, with Bill even threatening physical harm against Adam. In a sworn statement, Summer later asserted that Will threatened her with violence if she attempted to take their children, promising to confiscate her car keys, wallet, and cell phone and keep her captive. Summer also claimed that Will took her cats and either harmed them or abandoned them. Will countered, explaining that he took her keys and phone because he suspected she was having an affair with Adam. He stated the cats were wild and had been damaging their furniture, and he took them to an animal shelter after one scratched him while he tried to pick it up. On December 1st, the Inmans were being evicted from their home, so Summer went there to pick up more of her belongings. She brought Adam and a deputy sheriff with. As she gathered her things, Bill told Adam to leave his property and wait at the end of the drive, but the deputy refused this request. Bill threatened to beat or shoot Adam, and the altercation escalated with Bill wrestling the deputy. He was given misdemeanor charges, including resisting arrest, and was fined and given probation without any time spent in jail. Meanwhile, Will and Adam happened to be friends on Facebook. One day, Will came across a family photo showing Adam posing with Summer and her 3 children. Upon seeing the picture, the Inmans commented to others, "They posed in that picture like they are a couple, like they are a family." At one point, the Inmans even made false allegations of child abuse against Adam. Observers noted a visible decline in the appearances of 47-year-old Bill and 46-year-old Sandy as they rapidly lost weight. A custody battle over the children began, which deeply affected Bill and Sandy, as their lives had been centered around their grandchildren. Will attempted to gain full custody of the kids, but the judge denied his request just 1 month before Summer was reported missing on March 22, 2011. On the day she disappeared, Summer followed her usual routine after finishing her shift at the bank. She typically left the trash by the back door until the end of her shift, when she would take it out to the dumpster before heading to her car to drive home. During her shift that night, Summer exchanged texts with Adam, but suddenly stopped responding. Concerned when she didn't arrive home on time, Adam went to the bank to investigate. When Adam arrived at the bank, he discovered Summer's iPod, car keys, and cell phone battery on the ground near the dumpster in the alley behind the bank. Alarmed, he contacted Summer's parents, Debbie and Michael Cook, who promptly reported her missing. As the police initiated their investigation, they visited the Inman residence. Bill and Sandy claimed they were in Cleveland, approximately 3 hours away, searching for a new house on the night Summer disappeared. They stated their car had broken down during their trip to Cleveland. Police observed a white Crown Victoria parked in the driveway of the Inman's home. Subsequently, they obtained a search warrant and took possession of the vehicle. When Debbie and Michael Cook called the police to report Summer missing, they were not the first to alert authorities about suspicious activity involving Summer that night. Concerned witnesses had observed an abduction taking place outside the bank just 30 minutes earlier. They reported seeing 2 men wearing ski masks, using a taser on a woman and forcibly placing her in the back of their car while she screamed. One witness attempted to intervene, but was pepper sprayed by the assailants. The witnesses identified the car used in the abduction as a white Ford Crown Victoria. After examining a GPS device found in their home, investigators discovered that the Inmans had not traveled to Cleveland as they had claimed. Instead, the GPS data showed they stayed in Logan, Ohio, where Summer lived with her family and worked. The GPS indicated their presence in town until 5:30 p.m. on the day Summer went missing, after which the device was turned off. It was turned back on at 7:30 a.m. the following morning, with surveillance footage showing Bill, Sandy, and Will exiting the car. Summer was not seen in the footage. Further suspicion arose when it was noted that they had washed the car and purchased new tires. Authorities brought Bill, Sandy, and Will in for questioning at this point, 8 days after Summer had gone missing. Will and Bill remained silent and refused to cooperate with police questioning, but Sandy provided a shocking confession. She admitted almost immediately that Summer was dead. According to Sandy, they had initially abducted Summer as a scare tactic to convince her to be more reasonable and allow them to visit their grandchildren. Sandy expressed hope that they could have a calm conversation with Summer about arranging visits on weekends, and she claimed it was her idea to take Summer in the first place. Once Summer was forcibly placed into the car, Will secured her wrists with 3 zip ties and placed a 4th around her neck. Unfortunately, the zip tie around her neck was tightened too much, causing Summer to suffocate. They did not have a knife or any tool to remove the zip tie, and Summer died in the car as a result. When questioned about why Will put the zip tie around Summer's neck, Sandy explained that he had blacked out. This tragic revelation marked a turning point in the investigation into Summer's disappearance. After abducting Summer, Will, Bill, and Sandy drove her body to Faith Tabernacle Church in Nelsonville, Ohio, which was attended by Bill and Sandy. They placed her body in an underground septic tank on the church grounds, located 20 miles from the bank where Summer was taken. Sandy accepted a plea deal in exchange for information about Summer's body. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty against Will and Bill. Will and Bill were subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for their roles in Summer's abduction and death. After his sentencing, Bill told the court, "I regret my actions. I can't undo what I've done. I'm sorry for the families that have lost. I'm sorry for my family and my grandfamily. I'm sorry." After Summer's murder, her parents, Deborah and Michael, were granted full custody of the children, Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. The Inmans were clearly a dominant family, and Summer was determined not to live under their control indefinitely. They were prepared to achieve their goals by any means necessary, even resorting to killing Summer. What makes this crime particularly distressing is the possibility that a peaceful custody agreement might have led to a vastly different outcome. Becky Bliefnick was born in Quincy, Illinois, on November 19, 1981, to William and Bernadette. She grew up with her older sister Sarah, attending Payson Seymour Elementary School and later Quincy Notre Dame High School. She possessed a strong work ethic and determination, traits evident throughout her life. Pursuing higher education at Quincy University, Becky earned a degree in biological science with a minor in chemistry, graduating with honors. She got a job at a pharmaceutical company and was one of the top sales representatives. Despite thriving in her pharmaceutical sales role, Becky harbored greater aspirations. She wanted to become a nurse. Becky enrolled at Blessing Riemann College of Nursing and Health Sciences, where she excelled and graduated with highest honors. Following graduation, Becky embarked on her nursing career at Quincy Medical Group, initially in the gastrointestinal surgery department. Later, she transitioned to Blessing Hospital, joining their emergency room staff. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Becky served as a travel nurse, showcasing her commitment to healthcare. Her exceptional dedication was recognized with a nomination for a Daisy Award in 2020. Despite her professional accomplishments, Becky's utmost priority was her family, particularly her children. During her time at Quincy University, Becky crossed paths with Tim Bliefnick, marking the beginning of their journey together. Initially, they relocated to Chicago before returning to Quincy, Illinois, where they exchanged vows on November 8, 2009. They had 3 sons, and Becky loved them very much. She created a Halloween costume for them, took them to school events, sports activities, etc. She also devoted herself to various volunteering endeavors, whether assisting at her children's school events, orchestrating luncheons and dances. Despite excelling in her professional endeavors and flourishing in her relationships with her children, friends, and family, one aspect of Becky's life that struggled was her marriage to Tim. Becky and Tim had been grappling with marital issues for several years, but these struggles became more pronounced in 2020. Their disparity in viewpoints regarding the future of their marriage became evident. While Becky was staunchly committed to salvaging their relationship, Tim held a contrasting perspective. Becky made earnest efforts to mend their bond by proposing couples counseling, family therapy, and open communication to address their challenges. Her primary motivation was to preserve their marriage for the well-being of their children. She prioritized creating a nurturing environment where their sons could experience the presence of both parents. Despite Becky's persistent efforts to address their issues, Tim remained steadfast in his desire for a divorce. Becky was acutely aware of Tim's stance on the matter. Eventually, Tim initiated the divorce proceedings in January 2021. At the onset of the divorce proceedings, Becky submitted several temporary orders or requests. Firstly, she sought the return of her 9mm handgun, which she alleged Tim had taken without permission. In the event Tim couldn't return the firearm, Becky insisted he reimburse her for its estimated value of $800. Additionally, Becky was resolute in her demand that her children have no unsupervised interaction with Tim's father. Tim's requests during the divorce proceedings included a 60-40 custody arrangement in his favor, allowing his father to have unsupervised visits with the children, exemption from paying child support, and gaining possession of the shared residence. However, when Becky reviewed these terms, she promptly rejected them. In response, she filed a restraining order against Tim and his father. Subsequently, Tim retaliated by filing a restraining order against Becky as well. As February 23, 2023 approached, Tim had been granted visitation with the boys in the days leading up to it. The arrangement dictated that they would switch custody on that particular day. Becky was supposed to collect them from school on that day. However, despite Tim's attempts to contact her via text and phone calls, he couldn't reach her. Concerned, he reached out to Becky's father, William, to inquire if he had heard from her. Unfortunately, William confirmed that he hadn't been in contact with Becky all day. Tim informed William that it was Becky's responsibility to pick up the boys from school on that day, but she was not responding to any attempts to contact her. Concerned about her well-being, William made several unsuccessful attempts to reach Becky. Growing increasingly worried, William decided to take matters into his own hands and drove to Becky's house. Upon arriving, he noticed that the front door was open. Knowing Becky as someone who was meticulous about securing her home, seeing the door ajar heightened William's sense of unease, indicating that something might be amiss. William entered Becky's home and called out her name as he searched through the downstairs area. Moving upstairs to Becky's room, he proceeded to her bathroom. There, he made the harrowing discovery of his daughter lying on the bathroom floor, evidently wounded by several gunshots. Overwhelmed by shock and distress, William rushed to a neighbor's house to call 911 since he had forgotten his cell phone. Emergency responders and law enforcement arrived promptly upon receiving the call for assistance. Upon examining the crime scene, authorities discovered several plastic pieces scattered around Becky's body. Additionally, a towel and an ice pack were found inside the underwear she was wearing. Multiple bullet casings were also found in close proximity to her. Dr. Scott Denton, a seasoned forensic pathologist with extensive experience, conducted the autopsy on Becky's body. He noted that Becky had undergone surgery a few days before her murder, which explained her attire consisting of surgical pants and compression pads. The compression pads, designed to absorb blood, accounted for the limited blood pooling around her body, as they effectively contained the blood loss. The autopsy findings concluded that Becky's cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, totaling 14 in all. 9 of these shots were directed at her chest, while 3 targeted her right arm and 2 hit her left hand. Dr. Denton determined that none of the gunshot wounds were immediately fatal. However, Becky succumbed to internal bleeding. One of the shots resulted in paralysis from the waist down, while another penetrated her lungs, leading to respiratory distress. The combination of internal bleeding, paralysis, and respiratory impairment ultimately led to her demise. As the police initiated their investigation, they immediately noted an open window in Becky's second-story bedroom, indicating potential forced entry. 8 shell casings were found surrounding her body, suggesting multiple shots were fired. However, the absence of fingerprints throughout the house complicated the investigation. Further examination revealed that Becky's bedroom door had been damaged, suggesting an attempt closed the door from the attacker, although it was forcibly breached. Becky's cell phone was discovered behind the bedroom door, indicating her attempt to call 911 for help. Police made a significant discovery when they found a crowbar on the bedroom floor alongside a shoe imprint on the carpet. This led them to infer that the crowbar was likely used to force open the second-story window for entry into Becky's bedroom. Interviews with Becky's neighbors yielded no reports of suspicious activity during the early hours of the 23rd. However, later on in the morning, Becky's neighbors did see that her front door was left open, which they did find to be odd. The security camera footage from Becky's neighbor provided a crucial piece of evidence. At 1:05 a.m. on February 23rd, the camera captured an individual approaching and later departing from Becky's driveway at 1:53 a.m. Unfortunately, due to the angle of the footage, the person's identity remained undetermined. However, the timing aligned with police findings from Becky's security system, which indicated that her front door was open at 1:13 a.m. on the same day. Furthermore, authorities learned from Becky's son's school that Tim had contacted them on the 23rd, informing them that he couldn't reach Becky and that he would be collecting the children instead. These details began to form a clearer picture of the events surrounding Becky's tragic demise. In the initial stages of the investigation, the police faced a scarcity of tangible evidence to pursue. Despite piecing together various peculiar occurrences from the night of the incident, they lacked concrete physical evidence to guide their investigation towards identifying the perpetrator. However, following Becky's tragic death, individuals close to her began to step forward and share information with the authorities. Following Becky's tragic death, numerous friends and relatives approached the authorities, revealing that in the period preceding her demise, Becky had expressed apprehension about her safety. She confided in several loved ones that she harbored fears regarding her ex-husband, Tim. Becky went to the extent of informing people that if any harm befell her, she believed Tim would be responsible. Becky openly shared with certain friends and family members that Tim's threats stemmed from his desire to prevent her from accessing his financial assets. After their divorce, various assets such as the house and other possessions would become contentious issues for Tim. He explicitly warned Becky, "You'll never see a penny of my money." Given these circumstances, it's hardly surprising that the authorities' initial focus in the investigation was on Tim. Initially, authorities secured a search warrant for Tim's residence, conducting a thorough search on March 1st, 2023. During this search, they seized numerous items for further examination. The initial items discovered by the police in Tim's residence were crowbars, with one located in the basement and several others found scattered throughout the house, all of which were subsequently collected. Additionally, authorities uncovered 27 shell casings in Tim's basement, which they were able to match with those found at Becky's home. This crucial discovery revealed that the shell casings recovered from both locations were identical, linking the shell casings found in Tim's basement to those used in Becky's tragic demise. Upon examining Tim's phone records, the police uncovered a series of troubling searches he had conducted. These searches included queries such as how to use a crowbar to open a door, forcing open locked doors with a crowbar, and constructing a homemade pistol silencer. Furthermore, various types of gloves, including white latex ones, were found in Tim's basement. Additionally, investigators discovered plastic bags from an Aldi's grocery store, which they suspect were used by Tim to create his homemade pistol silencer. Police found additional ammunition in Tim's garage, specifically 9mm bullets in a box matching the shell casings found at Becky's crime scene. As mentioned earlier, Becky owned a 9mm gun she believed Tim had taken from her. This raised the crucial question for investigators. Was Becky killed with her own firearm? During the search of Tim's residence, police located a gun safe in his bedroom. However, upon opening it, they found it empty. Tim did possess a second 9mm handgun that he had purchased himself and stored downstairs. Yet, Becky's gun remained missing, adding another layer to the investigation. Another significant discovery that caught the attention of the police was a bicycle found near Tim's residence. The bike appeared undamaged, with no flat tires, yet it was abandoned next to a garage approximately a block away from Tim's house. Authorities traced the bike back to a sale on Facebook Marketplace in October 2022. The seller couldn't recall the buyer's identity, but mentioned that the transaction was conducted in cash. This detail holds significance because investigators suspect that Tim used a bicycle to travel from his residence to Becky's house on the night of her murder. Given the proximity between their homes, if Tim indeed rode a bike, the journey would have taken him less than 5 minutes to reach Becky's house. On March 13, 2023, Tim was formally arrested for the murder of Becky Bleefnick. He faces serious charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion. Based on the evidence presented at the trial, the prosecution has constructed a compelling argument. They theorized that in the early hours of February 23rd, Tim left his home where his children were sleeping and rode his bike to Becky's residence. It's believed that he initially tried to use a crowbar to force open the front door, but when unsuccessful, resorted to entering through a window. The presence of an open window and a chair positioned against the house suggests that Tim used it as a foothold to access Becky's room. Authorities suspected that once Tim gained entry into the house, a violent struggle ensued between him and Becky. It's believed that Becky fiercely resisted, doing everything in her power to defend herself. The prosecution contends that she rushed to her bedroom, seizing her phone in a panic to dial 911 as Tim pursued her. However, in her attempt to dial, she also struggled to shut the bedroom door, which Tim then forcibly opened. This action caused the phone to be knocked from Rebecca's grasp, preventing her from completing the call to 911. According to their argument, Rebecca sought refuge in the bathroom, but Tim continued to pursue her. They assert that as she turned to face him, she was shot and collapsed to the floor. Subsequently, it's alleged that Tim opened the bathroom door and proceeded to fire several more shots at Becky before departing through the front door, leaving her to endure a slow and agonizing death. The defense presented a contrasting perspective, asserting that despite the acrimony of Tim and Becky's divorce proceedings, this does not inherently implicate Tim as the perpetrator. They argued that the evidence against him is purely circumstantial. The defense suggested that the crime might have been a spontaneous act rather than premeditated, and they cast suspicion on the individual Becky was dating at the time of her murder. At the time of her death, Becky had been romantically involved with a man named Ted Johnson. Their relationship began in January 2022, and they became romantically involved during the summer of that year. The last time Ted saw Becky was on February 21st, the day after she underwent surgery. On that day, Ted brought food to Becky's house, spent around an hour with her, assisted her in getting settled for the night, and helped her into bed. On the evening of February 22nd, shortly before her tragic death, Becky and Ted exchanged text messages. Becky mentioned to Ted that she was busy doing laundry and taking care of some bills. She expressed her anticipation for seeing her children the following day and looked forward to being able to drive again, as her recent surgery had temporarily prevented her from doing so. Their communication concluded with a 26-minute phone call at 9:47 p.m. before they bid each other goodnight. The defense highlighted that Ted owned a firearm, specifically a .40 caliber gun, although he also previously owned a 9mm handgun, which he lost. Another point brought up by the defense was Ted's possession of money entrusted to him by Becky. Becky had given Ted $13,000 in cash to hold on to, which Ted kept in his safe. However, Ted maintained that he was unaware of the contents of the bag. Ted asserted that Becky had given him the bag without disclosing its contents and had asked him to keep it for her temporarily. He maintained that he never opened the bag to see what was inside and claimed that he only learned about the $13,000 it contained from the police after Becky's death. It seems the defense sought to suggest that Ted might have had a motive due to his possession of the $13,000 entrusted to him by Becky. However, after deliberation, the jury found Tim Bleefnick guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. On September 11, 2014, a Thursday morning, Sabrina Hall contacted the authorities just before 10 a.m. to request a welfare check on her co-worker, Tammy Jo Blanton. Tammy, aged 46, was expected at work that day, but when she failed to arrive, Sabrina phoned her and was unexpectedly answered by a man claiming to be Tammy's brother. He informed Sabrina that Tammy was tending to their ill father. Skeptical of the man's claims, Sabrina urged the police to investigate Tammy's well-being. Responding to Sabrina's call, police arrived at Tammy's residence in Jeffersonville, Indiana, United States, shortly after 10 a.m. on September 11th, mere minutes after Sabrina's call. This visit marked the second time officers had been dispatched to Tammy's home that day. Earlier, at 2:52 a.m., Tammy herself had dialed 911, reporting her ex-boyfriend, Joseph Oberhansley, refusing to leave her premises. Upon their initial arrival, Joseph was found outside the residence, claiming his key was not functional. When asked for identification, he presented credentials indicating a different address. Tammy informed the police of her terminated relationship with Joseph, her change of locks, and her desire for him to depart. Despite his reluctance and grievances about perceived bias in favor of women, Joseph eventually left. However, upon returning home, he vented to his mother about the incident at Tammy's house. Upon responding to the welfare check request just after 10 a.m., a different set of officers observed Tammy's vehicle parked in the driveway. Upon inspection of the residence, they discovered evidence of forced entry at the rear entrance. A man identified as Joe met them at the front door, claiming no possession of identification when asked. He stated that Tammy was not present and he was unaware of her whereabouts. Suspecting foul play, the officers escorted him outside where they noticed an injury to his right hand, with blood evident on his knuckles. Subsequent searching revealed a folding knife in his pocket, bearing traces of blood and hair. Upon entering Tammy's residence, the police discovered significant evidence of a violent altercation. The back door showed signs of forced entry, and blood was present on various surfaces throughout the house, prompting one officer to remark on the extensive blood spatter. Additionally, the bathroom door had been forcefully kicked in. Upon entering the bathroom, officers encountered a disturbing scene. Tammy's lifeless body lay inside the bathtub, which was covered by a large vinyl camping tent. Tammy had sustained numerous severe injuries, including deep lacerations to her head, face, neck, and chest, with a particularly grievous slash across her neck. Furthermore, her skull exhibited extensive damage, with a notable portion missing, along with brain tissue found both in the bathtub and in nearby trash receptacles. Shockingly, a section of Tammy's skull had been removed and left in the bathtub. Further examination revealed that several cuts to Tammy's chest had created a sizable cavity, and her heart was conspicuously absent from its rightful place within her chest cavity. The search of the house unearthed even more disturbing evidence related to the murder. In the kitchen, police discovered a plate containing what appeared to be skull bone and blood, alongside a skillet and a pair of tongs with blood-stained handles atop the stove. The events that transpired within the house between 3 a.m. and 10 a.m. were too gruesome for even the police to fully comprehend. When questioned about Tammy's fate, the individual who identified himself as Joe claimed ignorance of the events. However, further investigation revealed him to be Tammy's ex-boyfriend, Joseph Oberhansley. Upon further interrogation, Joseph admitted to returning to Tammy's residence after the initial police visit. He strategically parked his vehicle several blocks away to avoid detection, then forcibly entered the house through the back door. Joseph recounted that Tammy had barricaded herself in the bathroom, prompting him to violently breach the door. Once inside, Joseph brutally attacked Tammy with a knife until she succumbed to her injuries. Shockingly, he then proceeded to use a jigsaw to extract a portion of Tammy's brain, consuming it raw. Subsequently, he cooked another portion of her brain on the skillet found in the kitchen, consuming it as well. When questioned about Tammy's missing organs, Joseph shockingly confessed to consuming her heart and a portion of one of her lungs. Police further discovered a blood-covered jigsaw and jigsaw blade within the residence, corroborating Joseph's gruesome account. Following his arrest, Joseph Oberhansley faced charges of murder, burglary, abuse of a corpse, and rape. In late 2017, Joseph was deemed unfit to stand trial, leading to his confinement at Indiana's Logansport State Hospital for over a year. Upon being assessed as competent, his trial commenced in August 2019. However, it was swiftly declared a mistrial after a witness, one of Tammy's friends, inadvertently referenced Joseph's criminal history while on the stand. This led to a mistrial declaration, as per the rules of evidence which prohibit the introduction of prior criminal history without special exception. In the new trial, prosecutors opted not to pursue the death penalty, but instead sought a sentence of life in prison without parole in exchange for excluding evidence related to a mental health defense. During Joseph's trial, prosecutor Jeremy Mull delivered a compelling opening statement to the jury, emphasizing the horrific fate that befell Tammy at the hands of Joseph Oberhansley 6 years prior. Mull cautioned the jury that the evidence they would hear and see throughout the trial was exceedingly distressing, surpassing even the most terrifying scenes depicted in horror movies. The prosecution presented a compelling case, asserting that Tammy and Joseph had been in a romantic relationship that ended when Tammy decided to break it off, ultimately leading to her tragic demise at Joseph's hands. They emphasized to the jury that Joseph had confessed to the crime. Leading up to her murder, Tammy had become increasingly uncomfortable with Joseph's behavior and had expressed her desire for him to retrieve his belongings from her residence and depart. She had even gone so far as to pack his belongings into bags, preparing them for his departure. During the trial, it emerged that Tammy had harbored fear towards Joseph. She confided in her friends about the distressing events, including allegations of sexual abuse that occurred over the weekend of September 5th. Testimonies from friends such as Sabrina Hall and Tessa Shepard highlighted the stark change in Tammy's demeanor from initially being happy in the relationship to feeling deeply unsettled and fearful. Tessa specifically recounted Tammy's apprehension that Joseph might intrude upon her workplace, which sadly materialized despite the building's secure measures. Tammy's friends testified to her allegations of sexual abuse, detailing the profound distress she experienced in the days leading up to her untimely death. She told them that Joseph held her captive and raped her multiple times. The court saw the text messages that Tammy sent to Joseph after that weekend. "You can choose to be in denial about what happened Saturday into Sunday. I won't be in denial. No one, and I mean no one, gets to terrify me like you did on Sunday. I will never forget it as long as I live." Joseph asked her to come to him, and she told him to get his belongings out of her home, or she would file rape and criminal confinement charges. "I don't want to involve the police, but if you leave me no choice, that is what I will have to do." The prosecution presented evidence to the jury, indicating that on the nights of September 8th and 9th, Tammy opted to stay with a friend rather than return to her own home, until the locks could be changed. Concerned for her safety, Tammy's father installed new locks, prompting her return home on Wednesday. That evening, she messaged a friend, expressing her determination to reclaim control over her life and protect herself, affirming her resolve to prevent anyone from harming her. Tragically, in the early hours of Thursday morning, Tammy was brutally murdered and subjected to mutilation within the confines of her own home. The prosecution underscored to the jury that only one individual bore responsibility for this heinous act: Joseph Oberhansley. During the trial, the jury was confronted with the harrowing details of the injuries inflicted upon Tammy. The autopsy report confirmed that Tammy's cause of death stemmed from multiple blunt and sharp force traumas to her head, neck, and torso. The medical examiner's testimony revealed the extent of the brutality. A significant portion of Tammy's heart, along with a section of one lung, had been surgically removed from her body. Additionally, a substantial portion of Tammy's brain was missing. Her body bore over 25 sharp force injuries and numerous blunt force injuries, indicating a brutal and prolonged assault. In contrast to the prosecution's case, the defense argued that Joseph's confession had been coerced and that he was not responsible for Tammy's death. They posited an alternative theory, suggesting the involvement of two other individuals. Joseph's attorney urged the jurors to remain cautious of emotional evidence that might distract from the objective facts of the case. During the trial, the defense called only one witness: Joseph himself. He testified that he confessed to the crime under duress, alleging that police coerced him by repeatedly suggesting the narrative they wanted him to admit. Joseph claimed that he was suffering from head injuries and yielded to police pressure after nearly 3 hours of relentless interrogation. However, he adamantly maintained his innocence, asserting that he was not responsible for Tammy's death. According to Joseph's testimony, he returned to Tammy's residence around 4 a.m. only to encounter two black guys on the premises. Upon sighting him, they purportedly rendered him unconscious through physical assault, and he remained in that state until the police arrived at 10 a.m. "I was totally out of my head." The defense urged the jury to consider Joseph's account as reasonable and emphasized the lack of conclusive evidence presented by the prosecution. Joseph's lawyer cautioned the jury against dismissing the case or the defense's arguments, reminding them of their solemn oath and duty to deliberate conscientiously. "You have to be aware that there's a thought out there that you shouldn't deliberate on this case or take anything I say seriously. There might be a thought out there that that's what people want you to do, but you don't have that luxury. You took an oath." In contrast, the prosecution rebutted the defense's assertion that two other individuals may have been involved in Tammy's murder. They challenged this theory by questioning why these supposed assailants would have spared Joseph's life. "We all know they didn't do that. We all know Joseph Oberhansley killed Tammy Blanton." Following 5 hours of deliberation, the jury sided with the prosecution and delivered a guilty verdict against Joseph Oberhansley for charges of murder and burglary, while acquitting him of the rape charge. Subsequently, Joseph received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder conviction, alongside a 6-year sentence for the burglary conviction, with the sentences to be served concurrently. Upon exiting the courtroom, Joseph maintained his innocence, vehemently denying the charges against him and reiterating his claim that two black guys were responsible for Tammy Blanton's death. "I am 100% not guilty of these false charges against me. I am disappointed in the decision. I did not kill Tammy Blanton. It was two black guys." Following the guilty verdicts in the trial for the murder of Tammy Blanton, Joseph Oberhansley's prior criminal history came to light. At the age of 18, he committed a heinous act, fatally shooting his 17-year-old girlfriend, Sabrina Elder, at his grandmother's house in Utah on December 9, 1998. Sabrina had recently given birth to their child. In addition to killing Sabrina, Joseph also shot his own mother in the back before attempting suicide by shooting himself in the head, resulting in a bullet remaining lodged in his frontal lobe. In 2000, Joseph pleaded guilty to charges of manslaughter and attempted murder in connection with the incident. He served over a decade in prison in Utah before being released in 2012. Despite his violent history, Joseph found himself facing additional felony charges, including one for strangulation stemming from an altercation at a bar in Jeffersonville in March 2013. At the time of Tammy's murder, Joseph was on parole for the manslaughter conviction and was out on bail for the 2013 case. Shockingly, Joseph was granted bail for the 2013 charges, with a prosecutor consenting to a bail amount of $5,000. Joseph posted the required 10%, amounting to $500, thereby securing his release. This decision allowed him to roam freely, ultimately leading to the terrorizing and murder of Tammy Blanton. On the evening of August 29, 2014, a Friday, Christina Morris, a 23-year-old, intended to spend the night in Plano, Texas, USA. Despite her upbringing in Plano and maintaining friendships there, she had relocated to Fort Worth, Texas, with her boyfriend Hunter Foster, following his job opportunity. Christina had acclimated to life in Fort Worth and was employed at a dating service company. Over the Labor Day weekend, specifically on the Friday night, Christina Morris returned to Plano and reunited with her high school friend, Paulina Petrosky. The two had known each other during their time at Allen High School. Paulina, residing at the shops at Legacy in Plano, organized a gathering at her apartment for Christina and a few friends from Allen High School. The group, comprised mostly of acquaintances from Allen High School, gathered at Paulina's apartment at 9 p.m. Following some drinks at Paulina's apartment, around 11 p.m., a portion of the group headed to Harry's Tavern for 30 minutes before reconvening at Scruffy Duffy's. As the night progressed, the bar closed at 2 a.m., prompting some of the group to go home. However, Christina, Sabrina, Enrique, and Stephen opted to return to Paulina's apartment. On their way back, Sabrina, Enrique, and Paulina made a detour to Whataburger for some food through the drive-thru. Back at Paulina's apartment, the group enjoyed the food from the drive-thru, but Paulina and Stephen noticed that Christina appeared distressed. She shared that she had been texting her boyfriend Hunter throughout the night, initially hoping he would join the party, but later discovering he had gone out with friends. Despite requesting him to pick her up, Hunter ceased responding to her texts. It was now 2:12 a.m., and over the next 90 minutes, Christina sent numerous messages to Hunter without receiving a single reply. Christina's texts began by asking Hunter to come and get her, followed by inquiries about what was happening. She pleaded with him through multiple messages, informing him of her work obligations the next day, and even notifying him that she had misplaced her car keys. By 3:01 a.m., frustration set in as Hunter remained unresponsive. Christina sent him a text message expressing her disappointment, saying good night, and conveying sentiments like, "You lost the best thing to ever happen to you." Shortly after, Christina sent additional text messages to inform Hunter that she was taking a taxi home and said, "See ya one day." Between 3:20 a.m. and 3:48 a.m., she continued sending messages, letting Hunter know she was not angry, her phone had died, and she had found her car keys, deciding to drive home. The final text from Christina to Hunter was sent at 3:48 a.m. Christina's emotional state escalated as she persistently messaged Hunter. Stephen and Paulina attempted to comfort her. Initially considering staying at Paulina's apartment for the night, Christina later changed her mind, expressing her desire to return to Fort Worth. Despite Stephen offering to drive her home the next morning, Christina insisted on going home that night. Given that she had not consumed much alcohol and had done so earlier in the evening, the others did not perceive her as too intoxicated to drive. At the same time Christina decided to leave, Enrique also made the choice to head home, expressing his intention to walk Christina to her car as he was en route to see his girlfriend. As they departed from Paulina's apartment, Stephen called Christina to check on her, as she had been crying just before leaving. She assured him she was fine and almost at her car. However, when the 30th of August arrived, Christina failed to show up for work, causing concern among her colleagues. Despite repeated attempts to contact her through text messages, calls, and social media, Christina remained unresponsive. This behavior was uncharacteristic of her, given her responsible work ethic. On her Facebook page, her colleagues noticed a post from a friend urging Christina to call them, expressing deep concern. Fearing that something might be wrong, Christina's colleagues contacted her friend, who in turn reached out to Christina's family, only to discover that they had no information about her whereabouts. Christina's parents and stepmother contacted her friends in an attempt to trace her whereabouts, learning that the last known location was Paulina's apartment. When they reached out to Enrique, he informed them that he left with Christina, but they went their separate ways on the sidewalk. Enrique mentioned that Christina was on the phone when he parted ways with her, but he didn't know who she was speaking to. Concerned about her well-being, Christina's parents reported her as missing. In the course of the investigation, the police interviewed Hunter. Initially uncooperative, Hunter hesitated to provide his cell phone to the police. Eventually agreeing to hand it over, he did so reluctantly and only after deleting certain text messages. Hunter informed the police that he was not at home on the Friday night in question. Instead, he claimed to have been at a bar named the Concrete Cowboy in Dallas. While acknowledging that he received multiple text messages from Christina that night, he asserted that he didn't read them and wasn't actively checking his phone. According to Hunter, he only returned home on Saturday morning, around 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., to find Christina absent. Assuming she was upset and staying with friends, he didn't express concern. On Saturday night, still without any word from Christina, he went out with friends again. Hunter claimed he only became worried when Christina's father contacted him on Sunday to inquire about her whereabouts. Contrary to Hunter's version, some of Christina's friends and her father suggested to the police that Hunter might be involved in prohibited substances, use, or distribution. Hunter admitted to the police that on the night of August 29th, he was both selling and using prohibited substances in addition to consuming alcohol. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., Hunter stated that he went to the W Hotel with friends. When asked if he went to Plano that night, Hunter denied it, but acknowledged that the events of the night were somewhat hazy. Despite the suspicions surrounding Hunter's account of the Friday night, the police had to methodically verify and corroborate the information provided. Despite the suspicions about Hunter and a potential connection to Christina's disappearance, there was no concrete evidence suggesting harm had befallen her or that he was involved. As part of their investigation, the police visited the parking garage where Christina had left her car on that Friday night. Christina and the group from Paulina's apartment had all parked their cars at Harry's Tavern's parking garage. There, they found Christina's Toyota Celica still securely locked. No signs of a struggle or any evidence indicating foul play were discovered in the parking garage. In an effort to piece together the events, the police obtained surveillance footage from the area. The parking garage's security camera footage revealed Christina and Enrique entering together at 3:55 a.m. on August 30th. However, just 2 minutes later, Enrique's car was seen backing out from its parking space, leaving the garage at 3:58 a.m. Unfortunately, the footage did not capture Christina or her car departing from the parking garage. In their conversation with Enrique, he informed the police that he left Paulina's apartment with Christina, and they parted ways at the end of the apartment complex because, according to Enrique, their cars were parked in different parking garages. Enrique explained to the police that when he last saw Christina, she was engaged in a phone call with someone. However, Enrique claimed he had no further details as he had called his girlfriend at that time. When the police requested to examine his phone log to confirm the timeline, Enrique stated that he was sending text messages to his girlfriend and was not actually speaking to her on the phone. When the police asked to review these text messages, Enrique explained that it wasn't possible because his phone was configured to automatically delete older messages. Upon reviewing Enrique's cell phone records, the police discovered that he had sent a text message to his girlfriend on the night of August 29th at 8:02 p.m., engaging in a brief exchange. At 10:38 p.m., his girlfriend requested a call, and Enrique responded at 10:41 p.m., stating he was sleepy. Despite his girlfriend believing he was at home in bed, Enrique was actually at Paulina's apartment during that time. The next text his girlfriend received from him was the following morning at 10:52 a.m. During further questioning, Enrique claimed not to know where Cristina had parked her car. However, surveillance footage contradicted his statement, showing him entering the parking garage at the beginning of the night, with his car positioned one space across and one space over from Cristina's. When asked if Cristina had been in his car, Enrique insisted she had never been inside. He asserted that he left the shops at Legacy and drove home on Highway 75, which conflicted with toll road and cell phone records indicating he followed the Dallas North Tollway to Highway 121, passing through the Highway 121 toll gantry at 4:08 a.m. When confronted with the footage of him entering the same parking garage as Cristina, Enrique claimed his intoxication was so severe that he couldn't remember where he had parked his car that night. In the absence of information on Cristina's whereabouts, the police, at the conclusion of their investigation, believed they had enough evidence to charge Enrique with aggravated kidnapping. Cristina remained missing during his arrest and trial, and Enrique entered a plea of not guilty. The prosecution built their case around 5 key elements. First, Enrique was the last known person to see Cristina that night. Second, Enrique's car had damage on the front of the car, and the car was thoroughly cleaned. Third, Enrique's injuries. Fourth, cell phone data. Their cell's phones pinged off of the same cell towers. Fifth, Cristina's DNA found on mat in trunk of Enrique's car. The jury was informed that Enrique and Cristina walked to the parking garage together after leaving Paulina's apartment around 3:55 a.m. Their cars were parked next to each other, and the prosecution theorized that the kidnapping occurred either inside the garage or at a subsequent point. The prosecution suggested that Enrique may have intentionally or accidentally harmed Cristina in the garage, possibly placing her in the trunk. They proposed that Enrique then drove out of the parking garage with Cristina in the trunk, or she may have initially accepted a ride but changed her mind later. Surveillance footage from the parking garage was presented as evidence, contradicting Enrique's initial account to the police that they went separate ways. The recorded footage indicated that a solitary car departed from the parking garage a few minutes later, and no other individual was observed leaving during the subsequent 20 or 30 minutes. During the trial, it was disclosed that Enrique was scheduled to commence work at 8 a.m. on that Saturday morning, yet he only arrived at 10:51 a.m. According to a colleague, he appeared to be somewhat hungover from the night before and appeared disheveled, I suppose. The co-worker recounted that Enrique exhibited bruises and scratches on his arm, along with a noticeable limp. Additionally, the co-worker observed what he believed to be a bite mark on the inner part of Enrique's forearm. Enrique claimed to have been involved in a fight at the shops at Legacy, stating that the person he was grappling with had bitten him during a chokehold. However, Enrique later altered his account, informing his co-worker later in the week that a tire rim had fallen on his hand while attempting to rotate his car's tires, resulting in the marks. Enrique's girlfriend provided testimony, stating that when she saw him on Saturday evening, she noticed an injury on his right hand along with cuts on his hand and knuckles. During the court proceedings, Sabrina Boss testified that she perceived Enrique to be romantically interested in her that night. He appeared upset when she chose to lie down on a bed instead of sitting beside him on the couch. In response, he stated, "Fine, I'll just go home," and she interpreted his tone at that moment as angry. Enrique left, and when Cristina was leaving as well, he offered to walk her to her car. Stephen Nickerson presented evidence, recounting that he called Cristina after she departed from the apartment. She informed him she was almost at her car and sounded fine. She promised to text him upon reaching her car, but did not follow through. He texted her a few minutes later to inquire if she had made it to her car, receiving no reply. Despite calling her multiple times, all calls went to voicemail. The next day, his call again went unanswered. The prosecution introduced security camera footage from the Kroger gas station as evidence. The footage depicted Enrique using a rag to clean the passenger side of the car, followed by cleaning the trunk area and putting the car through a wash on September 3rd. In his trash, police discovered a bottle of odor remover, a multi-purpose cleaner, an all-purpose cleaner, as well as paper towels and rags. The prosecution presented evidence concerning the cell phones, contending that Christina's and Enrique's devices connected to the same cell towers when Enrique departed the parking garage. It was disclosed in court that Christina's phone pinged off the Spring Creek Boulevard cell tower at 3:46 a.m. on August 30th, and Enrique's phone pinged off the same tower at 3:57 a.m. Both phones also pinged off the cell tower at 5800 Granite Parkway within a few minutes of each other, and later they pinged off a tower located on East Bethany Drive near Enrique's residence on Harvard Lane in Allen. Details about Enrique's car, a 2010 gray Camaro, were presented in court. A dent was identified on the front passenger side, specifically on the right front fender. When the police searched the car, they found that the interior, particularly the front passenger side floorboard, had been recently vacuumed and cleaned. However, what drew significant attention was the remarkably clean condition underneath the car. An accident investigator provided testimony regarding the damage on the car, stating that it appeared consistent with a soft impact, possibly involving areas like the body, the buttocks, the hips, maybe a head. The jury received information on DNA evidence, with NTHSC DNA analyst Christina Capt swabbing areas of the trunk mat from Enrique's car that reacted with Blue Star. 2 DNA profiles were extracted, both matching Christina's DNA profile. Capt clarified that the DNA found was more likely to be a significant source, such as a bodily fluid. The defense presented its case, emphasizing 4 main arguments to challenge the perceived weakness of the prosecution's case. First, injuries. Second, DNA. Third, other suspects. Fourth, cell phone data. Regarding the prosecution's assertion of a bite mark on Enrique's arm after Christina went missing, the defense called forensic dentist Dr. Paula Brumitt to testify. After examining photos of Enrique's injuries, Dr. Brumitt expressed the opinion that the marks and scratches were not indicative of bite marks. Christy Wilson, the evidence supervisor for the Plano Police Department, testified that when the trunk mat was removed from Enrique's car, it was placed in a box. However, the box was too large for the evidence locker, so it was closed as best as possible but left unsealed for 3 days, an acknowledged breach of protocol. The defense sought to cast doubt on the reliability of the DNA evidence, suggesting that the unsealed condition of the trunk mat may have compromised its integrity. They also raised the possibility that DNA could have been transferred by the person who examined Christina's car before Enrique's. To support the argument that there were alternative lines of inquiry, the defense called Laterence Dunbar to testify. He was a private security contractor who claimed to have met Christina at a nightclub in Uptown around August 22nd or 23rd, where she became quiet in the presence of Hunter Foster. Hunter Foster, who was serving a 33-month sentence for conspiracy to distribute MDMA, testified at the trial. It was revealed that he had sold prohibited substances to an undercover federal officer on the night of August 29, 2014. His cell phone records indicated a call from Enrique's phone at 3:50 a.m. on August 30th, with a message asking for an ounce of a substance described as of that good rock. Detective Robin Busby suggested that this conversation was possibly related to prohibited substances. However, it could not be determined whether Enrique or Christina was using the phone at the time. Witnesses from Paulina's apartment confirmed that Christina's phone had a low battery when she left that night. The defense argued to the jury that, despite the absence of surveillance footage showing Christina leaving the parking garage, it was plausible that she could have left by other means. The police acknowledged the possibility of someone leaving on foot without being recorded. Regarding cell phone data, the defense presented a specialist in cell phone forensics and cell tower data analysis. He testified that records for both Enrique's and Christina's phones indicated that after 4 a.m., they were only making data connections with the cell towers. He stressed that data connections were the least reliable method for determining a cell phone's location, and it was not possible to determine the likely location of the phones based on this information. Despite the defense's arguments, Enrique was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison, with parole eligibility in 2046. Almost 2 years after Enrique's conviction, remains were found in a wooded area of Anna, Texas, and were identified as belonging to Christina. The remains were found by excavators and construction workers who were clearing the area. To date, no murder charges have been brought. On May 24, 2014, a Saturday, Blessy Godinko, a 56-year-old woman, completed her workday and was heading home. She resided in North Shore, Auckland, New Zealand, with her husband of 30 years, Antonio Godinko. Their connection traced back to their childhood in Cebu City, Philippines, where they attended the same school. Over the years, they dated, married, and had 3 children, B, Vincent, and John. In 2004, the family of 5 relocated to New Zealand. Auckland became a beloved home for Blessy, offering her opportunities to indulge in activities she cherished, such as exploration, walking, and discovering new places. She held a job that brought her satisfaction and had formed strong bonds with friends in the area. The Godinko family embraced their life in Auckland, evident in their shared experiences and joys. Just a few days prior, on May 20th, Blessy celebrated her birthday with her children, enjoying lunch at a pub in Greenhithe and a family dinner at Urban Turban in Wynyard Quarter. Unfortunately, Antonio couldn't join them as he was on a work trip abroad, set to return on June 15th. Blessy couldn't wait to see him again. They were a very close family and were happiest when they were all together. On the 24th of May, Blessy Godinko concluded her work at Tower Insurance at 7 p.m. Although her regular working hours were until 5 p.m., she had willingly taken on a few extra hours of overtime. Without pre-arranged transportation, as her co-worker Bahula Shah, who usually gave her a ride, had left earlier, Blessy opted to take the Birkenhead Transport's 973 bus from Lower Albert Saint to Birkdale Road. The bus stop was located approximately 700 meters from her home, and the short walk should have taken her just 5 minutes. However, that evening, Blessy never reached her destination. Upon returning home from work at 3:15 a.m. the next morning, Blessy's daughter B noticed her absence. Concerned, B contacted her 2 brothers to inquire about their mother's whereabouts, but they were unaware. In an effort to locate her, B used a Find My iPhone app and discovered Blessy's phone on a grass verge in Salisbury Road, a mere 100 yards from their home, at 6 a.m. In the vicinity of the verge, B also found Blessy's shoes and the Tupperware containers she used for her daily lunch at work. When the police arrived, they initially considered the possibility of a hit and run, given the scattered nature of Blessy's belongings on the verge. They contemplated whether Blessy might have been struck by a vehicle and was now disoriented and lost somewhere. However, it became evident that a more sinister event had transpired. A young girl residing on the same street reported hearing a woman scream at the time Blessy disembarked from the bus nearest to her home. Witnesses observed a BMW car overtaking the bus carrying Blessy, leading the police to scrutinize 28-year-old Tony Douglas Robertson. When questioned, Robertson claimed ignorance about Blessy and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Notably, the police were already familiar with Robertson, as he had a history as a convicted sex offender and abductor. Just 5 months prior, he had been released from prison and was under an extended supervision order, complete with 24-hour GPS tracking. Robertson's movements were monitored due to the ankle bracelet GPS tracking device, which revealed his presence on the street where Blessy vanished around the same time. Investigations also revealed that he had spent time on the 24th of May at Eskdale Cemetery and returned the following day. This prompted the police to search the cemetery, where, with the assistance of a police dog, Blessie's body was discovered 2 days after her disappearance. Her remains were concealed under pine scrub, covered with foliage and debris, and wrapped in a sheet. Tragically, Blessie had been subjected to rape and fatal stabbing. Following the discovery, the police arrested Tony Robertson, charging him with rape and murder. Despite the evidence, he pleaded not guilty. The prosecution asserted that Tony, a stranger to Blessie, spotted her walking home as he drove down Birkdale Street. According to their case, he intentionally struck her with his vehicle, resulting in her leg breaking in 2 places. Allegedly, Tony then picked Blessie up, placed her in the back of his car, and drove to his Birkdale apartment just before his 8 p.m. curfew to avoid triggering any alarms. The witness testimonies aim to support this narrative. One witness testified that they observed Blessie alighting from the bus at Birkdale and walking away briskly. They also noticed a white sedan-like vehicle overtaking the bus and speeding down Salisbury Road. The court heard from an 11-year-old girl who lived on Salisbury Road. She recounted that on the night of May 24th, while she was cooking dumplings with her sister, she heard the sound of a car and a high-pitched scream at around 7:30 p.m. Her testimony detailed, "It was driving up the hill from Eskdale and it stopped. Then I heard a high-pitched scream from a lady, and then there was nothing after that." The girl added that the car then drove off in the direction of Birkdale Road. In the courtroom, the prosecution contended that upon Tony's return to his apartment, he parked his car in the garage beneath his home and proceeded to commit heinous acts against Blessie. According to their case, Tony raped Blessie, strangled her, and brutally stabbed her in a frenzied and violent manner, ultimately landing the final blow to the throat. The prosecution further argued that early the following morning, Tony wrapped Blessie's lifeless body in a bedsheet, placed it back in his car, and drove to Eskdale Cemetery to dispose of her. They suggested that this timing was deliberate, allowing Tony to avoid violating his curfew. Forensic scientists provided testimony stating that luminal testing conducted in the area where Blessie's body was discovered revealed a bloody path, indicating the likely dragging of a blood-stained object through the grass. The evidence suggested that Blessie's body had been transported through parts of the cemetery before being placed on the ground and dragged to the location where it was eventually found. Details of Blessie's injuries were presented in court by pathologist Dr. Carl Wygren. He testified that Blessie had suffered multiple deep stab wounds, with one being so violent that links from her necklace were embedded in its depths. Dr. Wygren also said that when Blessie was stabbed in the throat, it injured her windpipe. He emphasized that all of Blessie's injuries were inflicted while she was alive, as evidenced by the presence of blood in her lungs. Pathologist Dr. Carl Wygren testified that Blessie sustained numerous injuries, making it challenging to pinpoint a singular cause of death. He suggested that a combination of factors, including strangling, blunt force trauma from being struck by the car, stab wounds, and incise wounds, likely contributed to her death. Dr. Wygren expressed difficulty in attributing death to one specific injury, but opined that the stabbing probably hastened her demise. The court learned that Blessie suffered various blunt force trauma injuries, such as broken ribs, legs, teeth, and abrasions consistent with post-mortem dragging. Dr. Wygren proposed that Blessie was likely strangled first as a means of subduing her, followed by the stabbing and incise wounds. Evidence of manual strangulation was presented, including bruising on her neck, a fractured thyroid, and broken capillaries in her eyes. According to Dr. Wygren, Blessie might have survived being struck by the car with prompt medical assistance. However, instead, she sustained further injuries, including sharp force injuries, leading to significant bleeding. When questioned about defensive wounds, Dr. Wygren noted that there didn't appear to be any, explaining to the jury that such absence is not uncommon in cases where the victim succumbs to violence. Dr. Wygren also informed the court that samples from Blessie's body underwent DNA testing, revealing the presence of Tony's seminal fluid on her body. This testimony added crucial forensic evidence to the prosecution's case. The court was informed that Tony, wearing a GPS anklet at the time, had been at Eskdale Cemetery hours before the murder occurred. The prosecution argued that this indicated premeditation, contending that Tony was scouting for a location to hide a body. They asserted that he had planned the murder in advance, selecting the burial site before choosing his victim. The GPS data also revealed Tony revisited the cemetery early the next morning, leading the prosecution to believe he dumped Blessie's body at that time. Crown Prosecutor Michael Walker underscored the significance of these visits, suggesting they demonstrated that the defendant was planning to kill someone and that the trip to the cemetery was for scoping out where to dispose of the body. The court heard that blood was discovered in Tony's car, and a knife along with some of Blessie's belongings were found buried in the rear of his property. The knife bore traces of Blessie's blood. Evidence of damage to Tony's BMW was presented in court. Detective Constable Shane Page testified that the vehicle showed recent signs of damage. A majority of the rear passenger's seatbelt was missing. When I dismantled the seatbelt, being the anchorage point, there was about a meter, I think 940 mm of the seatbelt was missing. It had been cut. Detective further testified about additional damage inside Tony's car, including cuts and scratches on the leather seating in the back. He noted a significant area of replaced foam inside the back seat and blood found on the passenger's seat and in the car's trunk. Otto Glazier told the court that on May 26th, he was summoned to Tony's residence to repair a broken BMW windscreen. He found it unusual that the windscreen had already been removed from the car, and he observed blood inside the vehicle. When he inquired about the cause of the damage, Tony claimed it happened while joking around with friends. According to Tony, a friend slipped on the bonnet and crashed through the glass. Sergeant from the serious crash unit testified that he believed Blessie was intentionally struck. He suggested that she was hit while walking on the pavement, basing his belief on the discovery of a tire imprint on the verge near where her belongings were found. In the defense's case, Tony admitted to causing Blessie's death, but asserted that it was accidental and not premeditated. According to his defense, Tony claimed to have panicked after accidentally hitting Blessie and then inflicted the injuries found on her body to make the incident appear like a random attack. He maintained that all injuries were inflicted post-mortem. During the trial, Tony dismissed his legal team and chose to defend himself. Tony told the court that he denied the prosecution's version of events and emphasized that he panicked after the accidental collision. He argued that putting Blessie in his car and driving home was solely to comply with his curfew. I put her straight in my car to comply with my curfew that demanded I be there at 8 p.m. and stay there until 6 a.m. Tony contended that the prosecution was wrong in asserting premeditation, emphasizing the absence of witnesses to the car accident. He explained his presence at the cemetery on May 24th and 25th by claiming he was trying to buy prohibited substances. Regarding the DNA evidence, Tony argued that it was microscopic, and scientists had difficulty isolating and testing it. The defense presented contrasting opinions on Blessie's injuries from another pathologist, Dr. Chapman, who disagreed with Dr. Wygren's findings. Dr. Chapman's report, read in court, suggested that Blessie's neck injuries, particularly the fractured thyroid, could have been caused by another blow to that area. The report stated that the bruising on Blessie's neck did not appear to be from fingertips. Dr. Chapman's differing opinion, particularly regarding the likelihood of Blessie inhaling her own blood, aligned with Tony's defense that he caused the stab wounds post-mortem to simulate a random attack. During his testimony, Tony claimed that when he placed Blessie in his car, he believed she was already dead. He asserted that he orchestrated the scene to look like a random attack due to being under the influence of methamphetamine at the time. Tony also denied the rape allegations, arguing that the DNA evidence, specifically his seminal fluid found on Blessie's body, resulted from contamination and police malpractice. However, the jury did not accept Tony's version of events and found him guilty of both rape and murder. Subsequently, Tony received a life sentence with a minimum non-parole period of 24 years, along with preventive detention for the rape. In New Zealand, preventive detention is an open-ended jail term, allowing for indefinite imprisonment or recall at any time. Tony appealed the verdict, asserting that Blessie's death was accidental and contending that the jury should have been given the option to find him guilty of manslaughter. The appeal was rejected, and a subsequent attempt at the Supreme Court also failed, as it was determined that Tony had not presented anything during the trial to indicate that a charge of manslaughter could have been considered. He was denied further leave to appeal. The revelation of Tony's criminal past after his sentencing provided a stark context to his actions. Tony had been granted name suppression during the trial, concealing his previous convictions for child sexual offenses. The details of his criminal history were kept from the jury. In 2005, when Tony was just 18 years old, he committed a heinous crime in Tauranga. He kidnapped and molested a 5-year-old girl. Acting on instinct, a local officer suspected Tony's involvement, found him with the girl, and discovered the distressing scene with the child's pants down. Tony was found guilty of 7 charges, including indecent assault and attempting to abduct 2 other children. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for these crimes. Released in December 2013, merely 5 months before Blessie's tragic murder, Tony breached the conditions of his release twice within a short span. As a result, he was considered a danger, leading to an extended supervision order mandating a decade of monitoring and a 24-hour GPS tracking anklet. Justice Edwin Wiley, the judge overseeing this case, expressed serious concerns about Tony's propensity for harm. "I am satisfied that Mr. Robertson poses a very considerable risk indeed. I consider that it is likely that he will commit an indecency on a child under the age of 12 years and that he will abduct a child for the purpose of sexual connection. The evidence compels the conclusion that he is impulsive and that he is unable to control his anger and aggression. Mr. Robertson has a predilection for and a proclivity towards sexual offending. He has shown no remorse. Indeed, he continues to deny it. The tragic circumstances surrounding Tony's release, the monitoring order, and the subsequent violent attack on Blessie Godinko caused profound pain and anger for her family. The fact that Tony, despite being monitored with a GPS anklet, was able to commit such a heinous crime added to the grief of Blessie's family, who believed that the system had failed to protect them. A government report was conducted to examine the handling of Tony's case by the police and corrections. However, the report found no fault on their part and concluded that Tony alone was responsible for Blessie. Despite the lack of blame assigned to the authorities, the report made 27 recommendations for improving the management of high-risk offenders. Blessie's husband, Antonio, expressed disappointment and devastation at the inquiry's findings, stating that he believed corrections did not have the capabilities to manage high-risk sex offenders and that, in his opinion, the offenders managed the system. The Department of Corrections minister noted that Tony had served his full 8-year prison term for the previous offense and had been denied parole multiple times due to his lack of remorse. However, residents of Birkdale, Auckland were not informed of his release into their community. In a statement released by the New Zealand police, Antonio expressed the profound loss his family was experiencing. "Blessie is the light of our home, and without her, we will be lost in darkness. Right now, we are just trying to pretend that everything is okay, but deep inside, we are brokenhearted. We have been robbed. She is gone too soon.